Hello and welcome into the 24/7 Sports Football Recruiting Podcast. I'm National Recruiting Analyst Petagna, alongside 24/7 Sports Director of Scouting Andrew Ivins. We got a great show for you today, this Wednesday. It's DJ Pickett Day, the 5-star out of Tampa, Florida. He will make his decision tonight, 7 o'clock Eastern Time via Instagram, as those kids like to do. Oregon, Miami, LSU, those seem to be the three schools that are talked about the most. We'll talk about him. Also got some other guys making their decision over the next couple days. Think about guys like Derrick Meadows, Vernell Brown, you go down the list, Jabari Antoine, Bryce Davis, a lot of firepower coming off the board here in the next couple of days. And then we'll talk about the top true freshmen in EA Sports College Football 25, some sleeper guys. Drew's been doing the homework, digging on some guys at the group of 5 level that you can play with dynasty mode. You can grow with these guys over the next 3 to 4 years. But just a quick reminder, you are locked in to the 24/7 Sports Football Recruiting Podcast. You can find us every Tuesday and Wednesday at noon Eastern Time. Everything you need, college football recruiting. We'll talk some video games as well, all right here on the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. And Drew, without further ado, I talked about DJ Pickett at the top. I mean, where do you want to start with this dude? You want to talk about the athlete? You want to talk about the recruitment? You want to talk about the NIL, the teams that are in it right now for DJ Pickett? We got Phil Knight. We got Miami. We got a little bit of everything. Drew, this is a guy in the state of Florida. I'll let you kind of run with this anywhere you want to go on DJ Pickett and maybe some of the first thoughts that come to mind.
Well, I'm going to throw an early Petagna flag. You said he's from Tampa, Florida. He's actually at Zephyr Hills, which is where Zephyr Hills bottled water comes from. So right outside of Tampa. Got to give you a little Petagna flag there. But no, Coop, one of the top prospects in the 32 for us. I mean, this is I call him a black swan of an athlete. One of one frame, explosive individual, regional qualifier in all the track events. He's won a few district titles. Sitting in our top 32 right now. Is he a wide receiver? Is he a safety? That was the question, I think, really this time a year ago, and everyone has pushed him into this category of him being a cornerback. The thing is, DJ Pickett hasn't played a ton of corner over the years. You turn on the junior tape, what he has done as a sophomore, you're going to see a lot of wide receiver highlights, and then you're going to see him playing over the top in a single high look as a safety. So I'm fascinated to see where DJ Pickett ends up. You mentioned that NIL component, and I know both me and you, I mean, this is not our lane. This is Tom Loy and everyone else at the 24/7 Sports that handles the national recruiting. Like, they're the ones predicting where these kids go. With that being said, I know you've had some of these conversations. I've had them as well. A lot of college contacts don't seem to know where DJ Pickett is going to end up. It seems like the negotiations are ongoing, and I think it's going to make for an exciting announcement on Wednesday night because as of right now, noon Eastern time, seems like he could end up anywhere.
Our friend Tom Loy not here today, typically with us on Wednesday, and if he's not here, I guess the boys are going to run wild a little bit. And Drew, like you said, we've had some conversations with guys at LSU, Miami, and it seems like Oregon right now is the team to beat. They have 100% of the crystal ball on 24/7 Sports. But at least today, this morning, it seems like DJ Pickett still trying to figure out where he's leaning at the end of the day. Drew, Zephyr Hills, I'm on the profile, it says Tampa, Florida, but if there was a guy that I would trust on this, it's you. I think the other thing about DJ Pickett, when you start to look at the player a little bit, is he's kind of one-on-one, one of one. He's a different guy. I think you and I had this conversation along with the rest of the scouting team. When you look at a corner like DJ Lee, over 6'4", how many of these guys have actually gotten drafted as a top 32 NFL draft choice? And you have to go back to 2021 in Nashawn Wright when you had a corner over 6'4" who got drafted in the 3rd round, right? So these guys are unique. You got 2 corners over 6'4". I think the other thing that you said, he is playing a lot of one-high safety, a guy that I think when you start to project, is it the corner position? Is he ultimately going to be a safety at the end of the day? It's a little bit of a limited sample size when you try to put him in that box of a corner. Drew, the offensive production as well, I think, is something that you look at. You and I were talking this morning. I think there are a handful of teams recruiting him as a receiver, but in terms of the player and the prospect, 6'4", around 180 pounds. He's got long arms at almost 34 inches. He's got an 80-inch wingspan as well. He's got a lot of room to grow. He is a smooth, loose-hipped, fluid athlete. How many different ways can you say it? This guy, just in terms of his potential, the 2 guys in front of him, ranked ahead of him right now, both committed to Ohio State, ironically. Devin Sanchez and Naeem Alford both very different. I think he kind of compares more to Sanchez than to Alford, but in terms of what DJ Pickett can be, I still get really, really excited about this dude. We got him inside the top 10 for a lot of good reason. I think, when you and I talk about this, it's like one of those guys, you take it, you figure it out later, but in terms of what this guy can become, sky's the limit. That's why you see LSU, Oregon, Miami all battling it out for him right now.
Yeah, Coop, some things here to add some context about him, being kind of a unicorn. I believe week 1 NFL season this past year, there was only 9 corners on NFL 53-man rosters over 6'3". So it's rare territory. You talk about the offensive production, 95 catches, almost 2,000 yards, 27 touchdowns the past 2 years at the varsity level. So he can do it on that side of the ball. And I think when you dig in more to the tape, right, you see him running after the catch, and that can translate over to a man-to-man defender or an off-man defender out on the perimeter, right? We've seen him a little bit. Yeah, I think he was at the Battle Miami camp. You saw him playing some corner and some wide receiver. So we know he can do it. I just think, to me, it's going to take some time, right? He's going to have to figure out, okay, how do I maintain phase? How do I do it at a high level? And I think the biggest thing as well, between the ears, how's he going to be wired? DJ Pickett, he's coming with a big price tag. Wherever he ends up, I think there's going to be pressure to play him early. Okay, what does it look like when he gets to the next level? And he is beaten on a few occasions. How does he react? Is he able to keep kind of powering through that? That's something I'm tracking with him. But I think the biggest thing, like bottom line with DJ Pickett, he's one of these prospects where the mind can wander and you can get super creative about trying to find a home and project where he's going to align at the next level. But you said it, Cooper, at the end of the day, this is the type of talent you want to take. And really, we want to take a step back here. This is the theme of our top 32. I mean, Jonah Williams, kind of the same conversation. What is he heading into his senior season? Michael Terry, what is he heading into his senior season? So a lot of these guys, but at the end of the day, a very unique and rare athlete.
Yeah, I think ultimately when you look at a guy like DJ Pickett, the funny thing about him is, he's got an opportunity here financially. I think we know that. We're talking about a top 10 player in the country at one of the most premium positions on the field. Drew, the funny thing about that is about what you talked about with the wiring and the mental makeup, right? How is he going to handle the expectations and everything that comes with being one of the most prominent recruits in the country? I checked in with one of those teams that's in the top 3 that's going to have a hat on the table, and I asked that same question this morning. What is this guy like? How is he going to handle all those things that come with being DJ Pickett? They think that it's not going to be an issue in terms of it's not going to get in the way of his talent and what he could potentially be at the end of the day. Drew, I'll ask from an on-field fit standpoint or even just need necessity standpoint. You got Miami, you got LSU, and you got Oregon. We know what Oregon's capable of. It seems like Oregon's doing a phenomenal job right now, especially when it comes to the defensive backfield. You got Brandon Finney, you got guys like Dorian Brew. They're in it with a handful of other guys as well. The two other ones, Miami and LSU, in terms of need, who needs this guy the most?
I think it's Mario Cristobal in Miami. I'm going to throw this back to you because I'm interested to hear what you say. But talking with Gabby Urrutia of Inside the U, who covers Miami for 24/7 Sports this morning, we were trading some text messages. He pointed out, like, DJ Pickett is a guy that maybe you could pencil in as corner number 2 for the Hurricanes come 2025. So I think the opportunity is there. And I think really for Miami, for Cristobal, this would be a huge kind of statement for them in the sense of, all right, this is a premium player. And not only that, it's a premium player in state, and you'd be edging Oregon, which has kind of been the toast of the town on this podcast and this show when we talk about recruiting and what they've been able to do here recently. So to me, I think Miami's got to win this one. They're the school that has the most to gain, in my opinion.
How about LSU? How about Corey Raymond? They bring him back. Ironically, Corey Raymond was on staff when Brian Kelly got hired. They end up parting ways. He goes to Florida. He has a quick stint there. Corey Raymond spent the majority of his career in Baton Rouge, and you can knock Corey Raymond, whether it's defensive back development, whatever it is, especially in recent years, but in terms of acquiring top-end talent and DBU, LSU was a lot more acquainted with being called DBU when Corey Raymond was there. So I would look at LSU. I mean, you look at LSU's room right now. You got Ashton Stamps, a 3-star from New Orleans last year, a freshman they're high on. Is going to have to play. Javian Toviano, Sage Ryan, a guy that's more of a safety, had to play corner. P.J. Woodland was getting the majority of the snaps with the first team during the spring. A guy out in Mississippi, Drew, that quite honestly we liked, but it was somewhat of a surprise to hear that he was running with the ones. So they need this guy. DJ Pickett is more of what you were accustomed to over the last 10 years with Ed Orgeron, Les Miles in that defensive backfield. LSU's kind of gotten away from that. They haven't been really good. Robert Steeples was there the first 2 years under Brian Kelly. It was not living up to the standard. So they brought Corey Raymond back to bring LSU back to that DBU type of standard and what they're capable of doing. DJ Pickett would be, I would say, a huge chess piece in terms of LSU moving back in that direction. And Blake Baker, you think about Bo Davis on the defensive line, Corey Raymond, Kevin Peoples, they have a really good recruiting staff there. What's interesting about this one, Miami, Oregon, going head-to-head, I think two of the most aligned programs, especially when it comes to NIL, what we've seen recently. If LSU could pull this one off, it would show that, hey, they're kind of in the game and they fit there. Drew, the comments from Kirby Smart yesterday, and this will be the last thing on DJ Pickett, and it's not really about him, but I guess it's tied in to the conversation, really kind of taking a little bit of a subtle jab at his old friend Dan Lanning, who used to work under him, and saying, hey, I wish I had some of that NIL money. I mean, you talk to some other teams that have had to face Oregon and Dan Lanning head-to-head. It seems to be like it's kind of boiling up to be like a little bit of a point of contention. It's like, all right, these guys have a little bit of an unlimited pot that they can reach into for some of the top caliber recruits in the country. Drew, I'm gonna cry foul on that. Like, this is the game that we play, you know, and Dan Lanning went to a spot and decided to commit to this spot long term and is now in a situation where Phil Knight wants to commit. And obviously, you know, Phil Knight is at a point in his life where he wants to have some hardware. That's something that he wants to see in his lifetime. It seems like a perfect situation. I've talked about that just in terms of everything coming together, matching that with Dan Lanning's style of recruiting. It's interesting to kind of see this starting to come out a little bit just in terms of maybe the issues, I guess you could call it, that Oregon is kind of offering some of the top programs in the country when it comes to NIL.
Well, certainly a calculated comment from Kirby Smart there. And I brought this up in one of our Slack channels. Like, if you're a Georgia booster, right, someone that funds that program, you've had a ton of success. And the thing is, you know, that salary cap keeps going up. It gets harder and harder to go back to those same individuals and be like, hey, we need a little bit more. Where you have a program like Oregon, which is clearly striving for a national title. I'll say this, and we can finish on DJ Pickett. Just glad I mentioned Oregon as kind of the dark horse to finish with the #1 ranked recruiting class. I would assume DJ Pickett's going to get them a little bit closer if he were to pick the Ducks.
All right, DJ Pickett, one of the top names still left on the board, the #9 player in the country. We talked about the #3 corner in the land. Is he a corner? Is he a safety? Does it really matter? We'll see. Oregon, Miami, LSU, all in it. Make sure you stay locked to that one tonight. And DJ Pickett, we'll see what happens with him. So, Drew, moving on, sticking in the defensive backfield with that theme, Trey McNutt, maybe one of the least talked about top 32 players in the country. We haven't spent a ton of time on him, but the #1 safety in the land, he's going to have a decision to make on Friday. Oregon, Ohio State, Texas A&M. Let's talk a little bit about the player and what you like about him.
Well, it's the instincts and the range. I think both those things were on full display at one of those OT7 tournaments there in Orlando. The other thing, Cooper, this kid tested off the charts at the National Combine back in January. We always talk about that being a slow track. You know, came in at 5'11", 185 pounds, went 4.67. I'm sure some people are like, whoa, 4.67, that's not moving. Trust me, inside the Alamo Dome, that is a fast time. 10.6 in the broad jump, 31-inch vertical jump. You look at what he does in high school, you know, plays wide receiver, plays some corner, plays some safety. I think what stands out about him is he can cover, right? That is so important. Look towards the NFL, right? The guys, the safeties that are getting paid, they're individuals that not only can handle deep third responsibilities and quarters and all that stuff, they can move up and run with an inside defender. Trey McNutt, to me, he can do just that. He's our top-ranked safety. He's the only safety right now, quote-unquote, true, pure safety inside that top 32. Obviously, we think very, very high of him. And I think he's a well-rounded just type of prospect. Offers some versatility. I think he can fit into a variety of different schemes, but a guy that certainly schools want for a good reason.
It's going to be interesting. Like, is there a domino effect here? And what I mean by that is DJ Pickett's up tonight. He's going to make his decision, and we talked about the schools involved there, but Oregon really kind of being the common denominator. And then you got Trey McNutt just a few days later on Friday going to make his decision. Oregon, Ohio State, the in-state team, Texas A&M. What happens if DJ Pickett doesn't pick Oregon? You wonder if Oregon and the Ducks kind of recalibrates, refocuses on a guy like Trey McNutt. And yeah, you can say, well, it's not apples to apples with a corner and a safety. We just talked about that position flex, DJ Pickett. But Drew, is there a fit here that you think just kind of makes overwhelmingly a lot of sense for Trey McNutt?
Well, he's got some ties to the Buckeyes. I don't think it really matters to me. I think the story here is the rich are going to get richer. It's either going to be Ohio State or it's either going to be Oregon. We hyped up both of those defensive DB classes and what those can potentially look like. I don't know. Is there one jumping out to you? I mean, Texas A&M would certainly be fun because I think he fits that new look, what they're putting together there in College Station.
Oregon and Ohio State have an embarrassment of riches right now. I just think you can never have enough defensive backs that can do a lot of different things. I mean, Ohio State, just because I think it's more recency bias, they've had these guys committed for quite some time, but Sanchez, Offer, you got two corners in the top 10. Outside of that, you got Fahim Delane and another safety outside of the top 247 that we like as well. So if you were to add a guy like McNutt, who is a in-state prospect, who I'm guessing checks all the boxes, not only on the field but off the field as well. That's a guy that you want to keep in the fold. And with Oregon coming in the Big Ten, the last thing that you want to do is yield that type of player, that type of talent to Oregon. So I think just being on paper, not being Tom Lawyer or anything, reading into this, I think Ohio State makes the most sense here. But I think if Pickett were to go to Miami or LSU, I think it makes it maybe a little bit more difficult for Ohio State. So we'll see what happens there. Let's talk about a team focused on high school recruiting because they're not going to use the transfer portal. How about Clemson, right? 4-star defensive lineman Bryce Davis. He's got a decision he'll announce on Saturday. How about this, Drew? Your boy Manny Diaz. Clemson, Duke, South Carolina. It's going to come down to that region. We'll see what happens. Clemson's recruiting prowess, especially when it comes to the defensive line, we know what they've done recently with guys like Peter Woods and Tamarian Parker, not to mention some of the guys, Amari Adams, Isaiah Campbell on the defensive line. They've done a tremendous job year over year. That's the one part of their program that I think you can kind of rely on for what they're going to be and what they're going to yield. Drew, Bryce Davis, it seems like Clemson right now, the team to beat, but Duke, South Carolina is still battling. He's an interesting evaluation for a lot of reasons. Wasn't healthy throughout a majority of his junior season, but still a guy when he's right, Drew. He's a pretty versatile, dynamic guy off the edge.
I don't know if you remember me texting this to you. I think it was like a month ago. I said, is Bryce Davis this year's Ruben Bain? And what do I mean by that? We've listed him as an edge rusher. We've listed him as a defensive lineman. I think it's flip-flopped like 3 or 4 times since he first emerged on the national recruiting scene. Coop, let's just call him a quarterback chaser. That's what he is, and that's why I think he's similar to Ruben Bain. He carries this tweener tag, right? You can't figure out the positional home, but what he can do is he can close, and he can wreak havoc in the backfield. You said it. He was injured, only played in 2 games as a junior. Undisclosed lower leg injury. I believe he was healthy right away. There were some clips of him playing basketball shortly after, but only 2 games, so not a ton of production. But what I continue to go back to is his performance last summer at the Future 50. He was in that Final 5, had a ton of success against a really strong and talented group of offensive tackles. I think he can play in a 2-point stance, might be more comfortable, might find more success with a hand in the dirt, but he fights through blocks and he's polished as a rusher. If Clemson gets him, Coop, think about this. They would have 4 defensive linemen or pass rushers committed in our, quote, second round, right? So you would have Amari Adams, Isaiah Campbell, Ari Watford, and Bryce Davis. I mean, would be quite the coup for the Tigers, who, like you said, aren't in the transfer portal.
All right, so let's give him some love. I mean, Nick Eason, right? Oyster Boys defensive line coach. I think we talked about that 2 years ago, back when we were Oyster Boys Radio, and we used to do that in our team. But Nick Eason, he's a dog. Who's there? It's a two-coach room, right? Am I wrong there? I think you got the defensive tackles coach and you got the ends coach as well. Regardless, Eason, and we will get back to this because I know Drew is looking it up
Chris
right
Rumph.
now. Who is it?
Chris Rumph.
Chris Rumph. Coach Rumph. We see you guys. We give you guys a lot of love right now. You guys are doing a tremendous job. Clemson getting it done on the defensive line. All right, Drew, a couple more guys, both of them in the top 247, going to make some decisions on Saturday. You got four-star Jabari Antoine out of Louisiana. You got Jarquez Smith out of Georgia, one of the most highly ranked interior offensive linemen in the country. Just real quick on Antoine, your feel on him, LSU, Miami, Florida State, those are the schools involved. Another guy, we just haven't, I feel like we're just kind of getting out of Dodge. Is he a corner? Is he a safety? What is he? He's a big, long guy that can do a lot of different things.
Yeah, I kind of view him as an off-man corner, but he's got that range to patrol over the top. Another kid that missed time as a junior, broke his collarbone, was out for 7 games, came back for the playoffs. What stands out to me about him, Cooper, just turned 17 years old. You look at him, the photos of him, and he's kind of baby in the face. I still think he has a physical maturation to go through, high-hipped, over 6'1". I worry about the true top end gear long speed, but he is explosive. 43-foot triple jump on the ledger. Think at times he can get a little clunky in the transitions, but he makes plays. And I'm all about guys in the boot right now. Like, I think if I was running a recruiting department, if we at Oyster Boys were running the show, that's a state I would be investing a ton of time in. And Jabari was at one time committed to LSU. Now he's back on the market. I think he's got the tools to play on the outside. And like you said, I do think he can play in a variety of different roles. He's been a quarterback on Friday nights. He's also been featured as an inside defender. This is a guy you want to, take a chance on. Might need some time, but he's got multi-year starter upside in one of those Power 4 conferences.
We'll see if LSU can reel him back into the fold. Blake Baker, Corey Raymond, like I mentioned, seems like Miami's in a good spot there with Jabari Antoine. The other one, Jarquez Smith, the interior offensive lineman, top 247 out of Georgia that we talked about. Georgia, Miami, Georgia Tech, South Carolina, the Canes are in it with all these guys. It seems like Georgia is a leader here. Drew, you turn on the film, a guy that's playing the majority of his snaps at the center position. He's a lot longer than you think at 6'3". He's got a 7'1" wingspan. I think he's got 35-plus inch arms as well. Kirby Smart, what he loves to do, he just likes to hoard kind of the big bodies. Mario Cristobal will talk about that all the time. But if you have these type of guys in the state of Georgia, it's kind of hard for Coach Smart to turn them down. I think he's a functional athlete. I think he's actually got a ways to go. But if you think about what Georgia has done in their player development program and what they have in a guy potentially like Jarquez Smith, if he ends up picking the Bulldogs, there's a lot to like there. And I think the biggest thing with him, is he just a center? Can he play guard? Drew, I think he's got the length. I think he's got the athleticism to give you a little bit of position flex. So maybe that kind of takes a little bit of the anxiety out of the room if you thought he was going to be pigeonholed to one spot.
I love this kid, Cooper. You want to talk about a profile here. Cortez doesn't turn 17 until October. He is by far one of the youngest recruits, not only in the top 247, but just this entire 2025 class. And why does that matter? Okay, I mean, he's younger than a lot of his peers. There's more developmental upside there. You just hit on it. How about this, Coop? Georgia 7A champ in the shot put. We went 56-2. He's got a 96 explosion score on our next-gen software, our partners there. I haven't seen a 96 for an IOL. I think he's a center all the way. I do think he could play some guard if you needed to, but there's a reason why we invited him to the All-American Bowl in January. That's because he can snap the football and he does it really well. To me, Georgia would pair him with Dontrell Glover, another IOL, and okay, so they got two inside guys. Well, let's not forget, what did Georgia do last cycle? There was tackle bodies, Daniel Calhoun, Michael Uiani, Marquise Easley, Marcus Harrison, Nair Daniels. They also laid out in Jazir Jackson. Georgia set themselves up where they can start building the inside, and all those tackles I mentioned could also probably play guard. It'll be interesting to see how it pans out, but I'm a big fan of Cortez Smith. Can't wait until we get around him in San Antonio.
All right, guys, stick around. We're only 25 minutes into the show. Grab a Capri Sun. We're going to talk about EA Sports and all those true freshmen a little bit later, and which guys you should be starting a dynasty mode with. But just a reminder, make sure to like and subscribe to the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. And you can find the Oyster Boys right here every Tuesday and Wednesday, wherever you get your podcasts in on YouTube as well. Sorry, lost for words there. I'm just so excited about everything going on recruiting. All right, Drew, we got some more commitments coming up as well. And one of those guys from the state of Florida, Floyd Boucard, 3-star defensive lineman. Love that last name. Number 43 defensive lineman. We'll have a decision on Saturday, USC, Oklahoma. We haven't been talking a lot about USC. This dude's an interesting cat. I guess you would call him undersized, 6'2 plus, quick twitch, explosive. Don't know how well he carries his weight, but in terms of the production, in terms of him just kind of being a dancing bear and a ballerina, light feet, body quickness, hopefully I'm painting the right picture. He's a fun watch. I kind of enjoyed watching the tape this morning.
He was in your backyard. He was at Mobile Christian. He's going to play his senior season at Miami Central down in the 305. He was kind of the story of that Under Armour Next camp in Miami back in February when it came to the OLDL. That's because no one knew much about him, but he dominated one-on-ones. This kid grew up in Canada, told me he played hockey at an early age. I actually think that kind of shows up on tape. Heavy-handed, power-based interior rusher. You said it, not the biggest individual, but he's nimble. I think he's a future 3 or 1 tech. Can be a key contributor with that snap anticipation. 85 tackles, 27 TFL, 11 sacks as a junior again at Mobile Christian. And it seems like he's going to leave the state. He is a man with no borders. He's been all over the world, not only the country.
Talked to Tom Lloyd this morning, mentioned he's not with us today. It seems like Floyd Boucard, USC, Oklahoma. It seems like Oklahoma's got the inside track there, so we'll see what happens this weekend. Drew, some pass catchers coming off the board in the next couple days as well, and some of the best. How about 4-star Vernell Brown, a guy that's kind of knocking on the door of 5-star status, number 36 player in the country, number 7 receiver. I think he's well in that conversation. Could he potentially be a top 32 guy? Florida, FSU, Miami, Ohio State. It seems like every team in the country who's anybody has done their due diligence on Vernell Brown, a guy that you're super, super, super high on. It seems like Florida is in a really good spot. Tell us what you like about Vernell Brown.
Well, you need to share with the listeners your kind of interaction with him out at the Elite 11, because I do think that is notable about Vernell Brown. And this is someone we've been tracking for a long time at 24/7 Sports. 3-phase impact player at Orlando Jones High School. Does it in the return game, does it as a safety, but he's an inside slot receiver that can create chunk plays. Coop, I was thinking about it when you put him on the rundown. Billy Napier needs this one. He needs Vernell Brown. He's a UF legacy. Dad played there. Dad was a 2-way playmaker for the Gators years ago. His sister runs track there. Florida right now is 67th in the rankings. They have 9 commits. Okay, so that is playing into it, but they're 67th. I think if you tell a lot of Florida fans, a lot of people that follow the SEC, that the Gators are sitting at 67, they would be surprised. That's 1 spot ahead of FAU at 68. And UCF and USF are well ahead of the Gators in the team rankings. That doesn't feel right for Billy Napier and that operation heading into a pivotal season. To me, the Gators got to get this one across the finish line. I think Vernell Brown can be another Trey Wilson for them, right? Eugene Wilson, you've heard that name. You saw a little bit of him as a true freshman. He's going to be electric in the SEC this year. They're going to scheme up touches for him. I think Vernell Brown can step in right behind Trey Wilson. And this is a guy that they need to get. And you said it, coming off the board on Sunday.
What do you attribute that to with Billy Napier? Like they're sitting, 67, 68? You said it, Florida Atlantic within striking distance. I think San Diego State 1 spot behind them. You mentioned South Florida, UCF, all the other major programs in the Sunshine State currently sitting ahead of Billy Napier. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think it's because of the temperature of Billy Napier's seat. I mean, as much flack as he gets, that doesn't help the Gators on the recruiting front. And I'll say this because I've been asked about it and I've marinated on it. I think you got to commend Florida for, not just grabbing what they can. They've been pretty calculated about some of the guys they've already gotten in the class. If they can add Vernell Brown to a wide receiver or a pass catcher group that already includes Josh Moore. Tayshawn Gesley out of the Jacksonville area. He's kind of like a hybrid tight end. I think he's going to grow into more of a tight end, plays wide receiver. I like those two. I'd really like that future of the offense if they add Vernell Brown. And then they got Waltez Clark, who is a pass-catching running back out of the Tampa area. So I think Florida has been calculated. I think there's a lot of high-profile prospects out there that have questions about, okay, is Billy Napier going to be there in 2025? So I think that's playing a factor. And look, it's set up where if the Gators win some games, we've seen them go out and flip prospects before. They can certainly pick up some momentum as the season progresses if they can win those games. I know it's the toughest schedule in the country, but Vernell Brown would be a really nice spark that they need.
If there's a dude that like I'm betting on, and you mentioned this with Vernell Brown, just getting around him, and we talked about it, I mean, at the beginning of the show with DJ Pickett, it's not so much about DJ Pickett, but if you're a top 50 player in the country, hell, if you're a top 150 player in the country, a lot of these conversations are going to be centered on around NIL. Vernell Brown, just the way that not only he competed out at Elite 11, Drew, but everything you hear about him in terms of the type of kid he is, wired, the way he goes about his business, he's got that kind of like professional mentality. So if there is a guy, we talk about the wiring, right? What's between the ears? This would be a dude that I would want to bet on. And on top of that is the skill set, the physical capability, what he can bring to the table, not only as a receiver, but in the return game as well. I think all those things are indicators not only to being successful, but to being successful early and making an impact on the field early. I love Vernell Brown. Stanford was in on this kid, and I hate to just use Stanford as the example, but obviously highly academic. You get around him and you feel it a little bit. There's a maturity beyond his years. If he ends up at Florida State, ideal fit, but a dude that I think can really impact one of those programs quite early.
Yeah, I mean, we always talk about it like blue star prospect. I think if me and you were sitting in a personnel department around the country, you get that kid on campus, you bring him in for a visit, you pick him up from the airport, you're going to stand on the table for Vernell Brown. Just the character, everything you said. I mean, professional-like mindset, and that's so important in this era when there is a salary cap and you are trying to get the right guys in your locker room. So, yeah, that is one of many X factors with Vernell.
All right, let's talk about one of the most sought-after receivers in the country, uncommitted five-star receiver Derrick Meadows out of Bishop Gorman in Las Vegas. Drew ranked number 32, the number 6 receiver in the country, right ahead of Vernell Brown. We'll have a decision to make on Saturday. The teams involved there: Notre Dame, LSU, Michigan, Alabama, and Georgia. Talking with Tom Lloyd this morning, it seems like a two-horse race. Notre Dame, LSU, you cannot count out Michigan as well. He told me that. Drew, one of the most intriguing prospects in the country, not only because of the physical ability, but a lack of production. I mean, it's a big senior year for Derrick Meadows. That being said, I think he could run back what he did as a junior. And I still think there would be a handful of teams lining up to take this kid just because there's so much untapped potential. LSU, Notre Dame, Brian Kelly, Marcus Freeman, trying to figure it out. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with Derrick Meadows. This recruitment's kind of been all over the place. You and I talked about Derrick Meadows a long time back. For Notre Dame, Andrew, I think we've talked about upgrading the speed, athleticism, and the size at the receiver position. They have done everything right with Derrick Meadows. I mean, from the early identification, evaluation, getting him on campus, getting him to camp, competing, they've done their homework. And now you got Mike Denbrock coming off a year where he had Jaden Daniels, top 5 draft choice, and a Heisman Trophy winner, not to mention Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr., 2 receivers that got drafted in the first round. And you got Deuce Knight coming in. So Notre Dame's got a lot to sell. And LSU, you got Bryce Underwood. And not to mention, you were the school that developed those guys. So this is a fascinating recruitment for a lot of different reasons.
If you're Derrick Meadows, where are you going? Let's say the compensation is same across the board. Where would you go?
It depends. Right now, like, I have more confidence in here's the thing. Mike Denbrock, in terms of what he showed over the last 2 years, you combine that with the fact that I'm either going to get Kenny Minchey, C.J. Carr, or Deuce Knight, if everything holds true. That is really, really tough to beat, not to mention everything else Notre Dame has done. And LSU, on the other side, listen, you got Nussmeier. He could be one and done this year with a good season. Joe Sloan, I think one of the best up-and-coming play callers in the country. Cortez Hankton we had on the show. I think he's one of the best player development coaches in the country. I don't think he can go wrong. I think there are a lot of options, and honestly, I think both schools are it's a similar pitch. It's fire with fire. We got a strong quarterback room. We got a strong receiver room. Where do you want to go get developed? If I were him, I don't know. It's one of those toss-up decisions at the end of the day. I don't think you can go wrong with either. Our producer, it's ringing in my ears. Like, Coop, you got to take a stance on one of these places. But give me the quarterbacks. I go with Notre Dame. I don't think you can go wrong there.
I'm going to add this. I would go, if I was him, I would go to LSU just because of what they've had at that wide receiver position. But I don't think you can go wrong. You just made the case for both of them. I want to add this on Derrick Meadows. Cooper, do you remember when we put him in the top 247? Would that have been like 12 or 14 months ago when we initially threw him in there? And there were quite a lot of people that questioned the decision. Oh, this guy, he hasn't done anything. Look at us now. Derrick Meadows, two of the top programs in all of college football, battling it out in advance of his senior season. We've come a long way with Mr. Meadows.
We have come a long way. And ultimately at the end of the day, it just goes to show, right? Like we continue to talk about it, it's a height, weight, speed game. I don't think you're ever going to look at maybe placing a guy early when you know it. Like the process calls for it. You got to take calculated shots. Like which guys at the end of the day are ultimately going to go and survive kind of like the evaluation process. And people still at the end of the day, even if they lack production or they lack X, Y, Z, people are going to want to bet on a guy that is 6'6" plus and a guy that has a elite track and field resume. When you see him live, it all kind of comes together and it makes a little bit more sense. Derrick Meadows is one of those guys, a lot of untapped potential there, similar with Cedarian Morgan. We talked about him in the 2026 class, right? I mean, Troy, Indiana, UCF, we're not trying to toot our own horn here, but these are guys that ultimately they're going to pick up more interest, not less interest, because those things ring true no matter when you look at it during the evaluation process. So we'll see what happens with Derrick Meadows right now. Notre Dame, LSU, they seem to be the two teams, but do not discount Michigan via Tom Loy, I have been told. All right, Drew, a couple more guys here. 3-star defensive lineman Jarquez Carter. Number 44 defensive lineman in the country. He's got an announcement tomorrow. That will be on 24/7 Sports Live. You can find that right here. Florida, Miami, Ohio State, Penn State, UCF, Jarquez Carter. Drew, I believe you're pretty familiar with this kid. What do you think about him?
Yeah, he's kind of actually in my backyard. I know you wanted to say that. He has dominated a low level of comp, 81 tackles for loss, 26 sacks in 3 years. Now, the thing is with Jarquez, he's on the smaller side, short-armed, but he counters just with his overall energy. I think he's the ideal 3-tech in a 4-3, a guy that's got some heavy hands, and he keeps the legs pumping, cleans up the trash, takes out the trash consistently, right? He's making plays in backside pursuit. I know Ohio State is leading on the 24/7 Sports Crystal Ball. Buckeyes currently sitting with the number 1 ranked class. Carter will certainly not be one of the headliners in that group if he does pick the Buckeyes, but I like the take for them. Good complementary piece to Trajan Odom, who's a much bigger IDL, kind of more of a nose there in that 4-3. And really, it's a unique and diverse group of potential pass rushers for Ohio State. You got Zion Grady, Zaire Mathis, London Merritt, Maxwell Roy, and like I said, Trajan Odom. I think it's an interesting kind of cycle when we look at that interior defensive line class. Not a lot of high-profile guys out there. There's that second tier, and Jarquez Carter's in the second tier. Floyd Boucard's in the second tier. Brandon Brown's in the second tier. I think personally for me, 3 of those guys I just mentioned are in the state of Florida. Kind of sorting them and seeing who emerges as that dude as a senior is going to be fun.
Is it me, or does he kind of remind you a little bit of like Boucard? I thought those guys were pretty similar.
You could put on the tape back to back, and you'd be hard pressed to find some differences.
I wanted to make sure we weren't taking crazy pills there, but good to know. Jarquez Carter, Floyd Boucard, some of the more kind of, I don't know, 3 stars are players too. Put it on a shirt. I say that all the time. These are good football players. Obviously, a lot of prominent programs in on them. They'll make their decision this weekend.
these are the type of guys, right, that if they went to the group of 5 level, right, and, played 500 snaps and had good PFF grades, you'd be paying for them in the transfer portal. So why not get them in early, get them in your own strength program, right? Develop them on your own. Like, I think these programs, grabbing these type of individuals, you should be trying to take 2 or 3 of them every cycle, just with how the counters work right now, how you're able to manipulate your roster and get it right. I think it makes a ton of sense. I'm not going to push back on Ohio State going after this type of kid. I'm not going to push back on USC or Oklahoma going after Boucard or Brandon Brown to LSU. Like, this is the name of the game right now, and I think teams have figured that out here over the past few months.
Says more about those programs doing the digging that is required to take players like this, get them in the program, get them at quite frankly, a lower cost, and develop them. And like you said, everybody's paying for these guys in the transfer portal. So the more that you do on the front end can help you, especially if you're starting to kind of balance your balance sheet and take a look at that and what that's going to look like in the next 2 to 3 years. All right, the last commitment that we want to preview, Dylan Robinson, the 4-star athlete out of California, Drew, number 8 athlete in the country. He'll announce tomorrow as well on 24/7 Sports Live. Notre Dame, UCLA, Washington. I don't know where the wind's blowing on this one. But shoot, man, digging back in on this kid this morning, 6'3 plus, he can run, he's flexible, does a lot of different things, plays corner, plays receiver. I'm just kind of like, yes, okay, good reminder why he's in the top 247. Big fan of this guy.
We got to credit Greg Biggins on our scouting team out on the West Coast when he put Dylan Robinson on the discussion board and said, hey, top 247 individual. I went back and I looked at what I wrote. Yep, type of traits we should bet on. Apparently, Washington is recruiting him as a corner. Notre Dame likes him at wide receiver. UCLA sees him as a safety. Coop, one of the rare prospects where I actually think I like him on offense more than I do defense. So interested to hear your take there. But we said it, really good athlete with the measurables and the testing, 6'3", 188 pounds, 4.49, 4.31 shuttle. This guy can move. I like his ability to get the football and then pull away from defenders. So I view him as his highest ceiling as a wideout.
A little bit more natural offensively, but I think I could get on board if you wanted to put him at corner. I mean, I think he's got all the physical traits there that you want. It's hard to find those guys at corner. It's funny. Like you and I always talk about this. Terry Bussey, even guys that are shorter, like which way do they go? I think you could even have that conversation about DJ Pickett. I mean, DJ Pickett does a lot of really fun things on the offensive side of the football, so always something that is going to be considered when you have a really dynamic two-way athlete. And guys, I mentioned Dylan Robinson, Jarquez Carter, and Derrick Meadows. You can find all these guys right here on the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. And there's the lineup starting with Dylan Robinson on Thursday, Jarquez Carter as well, both on 24/7 Sports Live. And then Derrick Meadows, the 5-star we talked about, LSU, Notre Dame, Michigan seem to be the top 3 schools battling it out for the Bishop Gorman standout. You can find that at 3 p.m. Eastern time. Guys, make sure if you're locked in right now to the 24/7 Sports Football Recruiting Podcast, make sure to like and subscribe. For the fellas, that fires us up. And Drew, without further ado, it's time to nerd out a little bit. I mean, we haven't even played the game, so maybe we're not the right people to speak on this type of stuff. But EA Sports College Football 25, it is out. And guess what? The top true freshman list is out as well. This kind of fires me up. The first thing that came to my mind was like, how'd they get here? You know, are they looking at the industry rankings? Like, do they have their own kind of independent evaluator? I was very just kind of curious of what this looks like. I don't have a contact at EA, but I would love to kind of just, you know, see under the hood and what this looks like. And here you have it. The list of the top 10 true freshmen in EA College Football 25, Jeremiah Smith at number 1. That makes a lot of sense. We had him as the number 1 player in the country. But, Drew, you go down the list. Ellis Robinson, top 5 player. Ryan Williams, the guy we had in the top 10. Same with Cam Coleman. Sammy Brown was knocking on the door, top 10 status. DJ Lagway, Dylan Raiola, number 1 and 2 quarterbacks in the country. Ryan Wingo, we had as a 5-star. Same with TJ Moore and Micah Hudson. So not a lot of surprises inside the top 10. Maybe when you look at that list, was there anything that kind of stood out to you where you're like, I get it, I don't get it, or that's interesting?
94 speed for Jeremiah Smith. I think you could push back a little bit on that. I mean, he is a guy that won some state titles when it comes to the hurdles there at Chaminade Madonna Prep. That was one that jumped out to me. Coop, just how they got to this, because essentially it is all of our 5 stars, right? And then you retract maybe some of the guys that aren't going to see the field as freshmen because they're, point of attack players. I would be fascinated to see how they arrived at these. And I think it gets more interesting the deeper you go down the list. You'll see some true freshmen who obviously were very versed in it. It's like, okay, wow, you see him here. I got some stuff written down with the speed scores that we can get into here a little bit later. But pretty cool. I mean, just to see it kind of, they view it the way we do. And I don't know how they got to it on some of them.
I think it's more of like, if I had to guess, a height, weight, speed formula, especially like Ryan Wingo. You think about a guy like him and a guy his size at 6'2 plus, ran 10.5 in the 100-meter, right? He can move, and then all of a sudden he's a top 10 player in the game. We got people in the chat living rent-free in UT. He says the 96 speed is real. I mean, absolutely. You look back at Ryan Wingo, run after catch guy that we talked about, the verified speed, that just kind of combination of what he can offer, and that's one of the reasons he's going to see the field early for Texas as well. Drew, if you look at this group, not only the top 10, but just in general, the first update that comes out, the roster update as we go 4 games into the season, whatever it is for EA Sports, where they got to go like, oh, okay, we got to update these rankings, and maybe there's some attributes and skill sets that we got to improve because we were off here. Is there one player that you're like, all right, wait till they see this guy? He might be sitting at like 80 right now, but by the time he's midway through the season, he's going to jump like 5 or 6 points.
Elijah Lofton at Miami. We have already highlighted him, I think, and we're back during spring practices. I have since talked to some people there in Coral Gables, and the feedback was even better than I expected in terms of this guy is going to play. You're going to see him on the field week 1 against Florida. I think he's someone that's going to shoot up the board. 73 overall right now. I think that's on the lighter side. And that his grade kind of leads me to believe that it might be more composite based, as I believe we were a bit of an outlier when it came to Elijah Lofton. What about you, Coop? Who's moving up the board for you?
How about Cam Coleman, right? I mean, I think that one's a layup, but you think about Cam Coleman and everything that you look at. I mean, it was a guy that ran in the 4.4s at 6'3" plus. You also look at his track and field background, what he does there as well. Guy from a leaping, explosive standpoint, can stretch the field, but the run after catch ability is dynamic. I think Cam Coleman is in for one of the best freshman years we'll see in a long time. And Auburn, obviously trying to fill that void. What has it been, like 17, 18 years since they've had a 1,000-yard receiver? Maybe that doesn't happen this year. But in terms of like players that are going to have that little star under them on NCAA football, that's going to be Cam Coleman. I mean, Cam Coleman is an absolute stud and a guy on this video game that I think people are going to be really, really familiar with. What's funny on here, Drew, is I'm looking at the chat right now and some of these questions, as it relates to your Freaks List article, I think it's funny because I think a lot more people are going to be looking at that because of this game. Somebody asked, Nick Harbor, 99 speed on the game. Is that real? Like, yes, Nick Harbor was a guy that was almost qualified to run in the Paris Olympics, right, at 6'4" plus. And Drew, I think has like a 10.18 to his name. That is very real. Like that 99 speed. If you're going to put that on one person, I've already heard the feedback on like Nick Harbor playing this game is kind of like unbelievable, just because he's a guy he's a complete freak in nature, maybe one of the biggest freaks that we've seen over the last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, and Sammy Brown's also got 92 speed, and there's no real way to like search every position, and College Football Network is the one that assembled the freshman group, but Sammy Brown, top freak. I would think that our list maybe fueled that a little bit in terms of what he was able to do. You also had Jelani Watkins. I believe he's the fastest freshman with 96 speed. I mean, that was another guy that was a decorated sprinter. So it is kind of cool to see some guys that we flagged throughout the process, and a lot of them ended up ranked high, but Koi Parrish at Minnesota, he's 75 overall, 91 speed. It's like, if he wasn't in the All-American Bowl and named MVP, would he have got that grade next to his name?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know. That's kind of what's funny, like just in terms of, I thought these guys did a really good job. There are a couple of ones where you're like, maybe I don't see it. We'll talk about that in a second. But Drew, how about this? Like, this would not be a Oyster Boy show without giving some props to our boy Luke Reynolds, a 5-star that signed with Penn State. The number 15 ranked freshman in this game. Dude, kind of wild. I mean, the boy's getting some run. I mean, like, you go back to our journey with Luke Reynolds, all of a sudden he's arrived, man. Like, yeah, sure, you're a 5-star, you're a tight end, you're the only tight end in the top 32, and then on top of it, all of a sudden you look up, and this dude's just kind of like a household name, hadn't even taken a snap yet.
Yeah, that was the one that jumped out to me when I scrolled down the list as well. Like, Luke Reynolds, if you're listening to the show, man, we need you to hit. We need you to hit big time because the hype is through the roof. But you think about that offense, right? New OC comes in. They're going to get the tight ends involved. And I don't know if he's going to be asked to be an inline blocker right away. I think, he's someone that can supplement the passing game, right? Get him in there in certain sets and certain looks. I can't wait to see him at Penn State, and I'm fingers crossed that we get a big freshman season from Luke Reynolds.
We might. I know it's an NIL era. Luke Reynolds like jersey tees, dude. I think that might be in store. We'll see what happens there. All right, last thing, tinfoil hat, right? You got to put it on. EA Sports. All right, I'm not being a hater here. Texas. All right, Quinn Ewers is one of the best quarterbacks in the country. I'm not going to debate that. You got Arch, all right, we had as the number 1 player in the country. He's ranked 87 ahead of guys like Jackson Arnold. And then you got Trey Owens, who's ranked as the number 23 overall true freshman. Listen, we like Trey Owens. I think we had him like number 16. I think the highest in the industry was a number 13 quarterback. He's got a 78 rating, Drew. It was like, okay, I'm going down the list. I see all these names. I'm really familiar with these guys. And then, boom, Trey Owens. I'm like, whoa, where did that come from? Was that a little bit of a surprise to you?
Yeah, another guy that was at the All-American Bowl. I think you're on to something with the Texas love. Maybe they didn't know if Arch Manning was a late ad, so they kind of juiced up Trey Owens' score. And then next thing you know, Arch Manning's in the game because he didn't announce until a week ago. No, we like Trey Owens. I really liked his senior season, what he was able to do, especially in the playoffs. I thought at the All-American Bowl, didn't have a ton of on-field success in the game, but he's got the tools. Surprised by the score as well, given some of the other quarterbacks out there. And should I go with my beef with the game, some of these ratings, Coop?
Of course.
Okay. I was thinking about this. We're critiquing rankings. And I'm like, man, that feels really bad because our rankings are critiqued all the time. And I know how it feels. But you know what? I'm going to go ahead and do it because I don't get that feeling a lot critiquing ranking. Some of these speed scores are head scratchers to me, especially at the quarterback position. Haas Haney at TCU, 91 speed. Now, he was a guy that played wide receiver. He ran track and all that stuff. But Damon Williams at Washington, 88 speed. This is a kid that ran for over 3,000 yards in high school. I think he's got like a 4.1 shuttle and a 4.4 laser time. How is Damon Williams not the fastest true freshman quarterback? He's got the same speed as DJ Lagway. Obviously, we love DJ Lagway, but DJ Lagway is not like some burner that's just going to run away from a ton of people. He's more of build speed. He's more of a power runner. And then Will Hammond at Texas Tech, the quarterback, 73 speed. The Eagle Scout ran for over 1,000 yards as a senior. I think they're doing disservice to Will Hammond, so I got to stand up for my guy right there. Some of these speed scores. Coop, Chris Cole, 86 speed. He ran at Nike National Indoors, 60-meter hurdles. I'm talking about the Georgia freshman linebacker. And then this is really the one that I was like, it has to be an error. Demel Jones, true freshman defensive back at Georgia. I know he was recently in trouble. They have him with 70 speed. This dude anchored a 4x100 team that took gold at Georgia's 2A track meet like last year, and he's got a 70 speed score.
Sounds like Oyster Boy's consultation could be in the works here with EA Sports. We'll see what happens. Drew, before we leave this EA Sports true freshman conversation, we teased it at the beginning of the show. Hey, Drew might have a little tip up his sleeve about a dynasty mode player that you really kind of want to roll with. And people love the dual threat quarterbacks. It just gives you more options overall. Talk to me about Josh Flowers, Arkansas State.
Well, yeah, one-time Mississippi State commit Josh Flowers. He's 65 overall. but you're looking to start that dynasty, and you like to run your quarterback who doesn't, move him around. He's got 87 speed, and I think he's going to be a fun player to play with. You're there in the Sun Belt, someone you can kind of build around. Hey, maybe you don't start with Arkansas State, but you're in that transfer portal in your dynasty. I think Josh Flowers is worth a look. And Coop, here's the real kind of like nugget on Josh Flowers. Billy Napier, when he did the Orlando Nike Coaches Clinic back in February, I was there, and he had his screen up, right? He was showing all these quarterback highlights, and he didn't remove the Josh Flowers cut up that he had on his screen. So Florida was sniffing around late on Josh Flowers. Remember, DJ Lagway, right around the early signing period, was linked a little bit to USC. So Billy Napier, if you think he can evaluate quarterbacks, well, he liked Josh Flowers, and he's got an 87 speed score. I think a fun player potentially in the game.
Hoss Haney is going to be fun. Damon Williams is going to be fun. Like, both those guys are going to be really, really fun quarterbacks to play with. We got the game here. I haven't played it yet. Kansas State, I think Avery Johnson, dude. I think that's going to be the first team that I line up with. I'll let you know how that goes. All right, Drew, time of the show, 4 questions. We don't have a lot. We only got 2 of them. But we'll start with, is it Canes Cats? Oh, our guy Canes Cats, man. He's got residency here on the 24/7 Sports podcast. He says, what has been the biggest changes you are seeing with recruits year by year? Is it development, coaching? Are players getting better or worse? That is a really, really good question. I don't know. Can I mention something? I think like the offense and defensive line in terms of the early identification and what we talked about today with Floyd Boucard and Jarquez Carter, I think that's super fascinating. I think being able to get these guys in earlier and earlier, identify these guys, it's a big deal from a financial savings standpoint as well. Like I was thinking about it the other day. Washington kind of did something interesting. They go down and they pluck this kid out of Birmingham at Parker High School, and Caleb Smith. Big body, guy that can play multiple positions, was a little bit dinged up, had a shoulder injury. And I thought, wow, there's Jed Fish going all the way from Seattle, Washington to Alabama for a guy that, quite honestly, Drew, like, I think a lot of teams were waiting on. He has a lot of the things that you want, but just in terms of, whether it was doing your due diligence on the health or we wanted to see more as a senior, he was a late evaluation. Now you have a team from the P&W in the Big Ten saying, hey, we can't afford to wait. We played in the national championship last year, but when there is an opportunity to get what we think is premium beef and develop those guys, we can't be in the market for trying to pay players at the defense or offensive line position. I think teams are getting a lot more aggressive in terms of calculated shots, taking guys a lot earlier that they would typically have on the back burner. Now they have to say, you know what, get in the boat, we'll take our shot. And if you have the right stuff, combination of the physical traits along with you're wired the right way, that's good enough for us. Get in the program. We'll get you at a lower dollar amount, and we're going to do our best to develop you. I think the O-line, D-line kind of like shell game that's going on within college football is super, super fascinating.
That's a great answer. I don't know how I'm going to attack this question. The first thing that jumps out to me is I think just the will to compete has just dried up. And I'm talking primarily about like rising seniors in this time. I mean, not too long ago, think about it, Cooper, we used to have these, summer showcase events. And I know the calendar has been accelerated, but I can go back to when Mark Richt in Miami had Paradise Camp. You had Devontae Smith, Jerry Jeudy running routes out there. I remember a few years ago at Florida, like Evan Stewart was lacing up the cleats and working out, catching passes inside the swamp. Obviously, there's been other editions of camps. You had Oregon Saturday Night Live, NC State's Alpha Wolf. Everyone's got one. But, man, those things they've gone away, like those elite premium camps. And, yeah, I know they got the official visits, but it seems like once these prospects, and not all of them, but some of them, they get anointed, they got all the offers, they got all the attention, the will to work out and get better, it quickly goes away. And I get it, you don't want to get injured, but sometimes I think that can bleed into the senior seasons, right? And then these guys show up, because I hear it from college contacts and college coaches, this, highly touted freshman shows up, and there's a big time adjustment period, right? They get torn down, and you're in a developmental lift as a true freshman spring enrollee. And some of those guys wash out, and that's why I say it's fueling the transfer portal, right? More guys going in and out of the door. People are afraid of the adversity and the tough stuff. So that's something that jumps out to me. I'm sure there's plenty of others, but that fire to compete seems like it isn't what it once was.
Great question. Shout out to our boy Canes Cats, always in here. Canes Cats, if you're in the chat, I'd love to know what you do for a living. I just love your enthusiasm every day, just jumping on the show at noon Eastern time. That's awesome. Tyler asked a question. When it comes to ranking players, what has more weight, game reps or performance at camps? This is a great question, Tyler. Something we've talked about, I think, quite a bit on the show. I think, DJ Lagway is a really good example. I think different positions offer a different kind of weight calibration when you kind of look at it. But the biggest thing we're trying to do is we're trying to project these guys not only to Saturday but beyond, right? Where are these guys going to be when they're 21, 22 years old and going to have the opportunity, if they have the opportunity, to be in the NFL? I mean, we're talking about the 1% of the 1%. So when we're talking about the top 250 players, and this goes throughout every evaluation, even with the guys outside of it in the 3-star range as well, it's all about projection. So we talk about a lot of different things. We talked about Dimitri Manning yesterday. Is he going to be a tackle? Is he going to be a guard? Really, the biggest thing that we're looking at, all right, here's a guy with 35-plus inch arms. He's got the mass that you look for. He's got the size that you look for as well. He's got what we want to see on tape. He's playing tackle, more than likely going to move inside to an interior position. Can he flash those traits? And that's the biggest thing. I think year over year, you want to see that maturation process. Give me a little bit more, right? What are some of the other things that he's doing from a multi-sport context? All right, has he shaved down the 100, 200 meter? What does that look like? What's he doing on the hardwood, right? We think he's a dynamic athlete. Does that show up with a double-double in points per game and rebounds? All those things kind of tell you something. Like, you think about guys and Carter Nelson. How much are you getting from 8-man football? Not much. How much are you getting from him being, a state champion in pretty much every event that he participated in track and field, and then also being a guy that's a double-digit scorer on the hardwood and dominating competition at an 8-man level? And then what's that look like when he plays at the All-American Bowl, right? And in this big setting against higher level of competition, there's no thing where it's like, all right, this is 60-40 or whatever it is. Drew, I think the best way I can describe it, a lot of it's kind of case by case and where these guys are in their physical development, weighing all that stuff. A lot of different variables between, what's their exposure to the game. You look at a guy like Javion Campbell, committed to Kentucky right now. If you were to judge him and say this is a guy that's been playing the game since he was in 7th grade versus the reality, he's only been playing the game for a year and he had 14 sacks last season and he's a basketball guy, it makes you think about the player a lot differently. So context matters when you're evaluating all these players. I think that's the biggest thing, is you're trying to bring in all these different variables and understand that every time you look at a different player, it's a different puzzle that you're trying to figure out.
Yeah, and I think to add on to that, look, tape is going to be the baseline, right? That's what we're going to. We want to see what you can do on tape. We always mention the senior seasons. Why does the senior season matter? Well, in theory, you should be playing your best football right then before you go off and you embark on college. So tape. I mean, we're watching huddle, we're watching full games all the time. Tape is important. But in our business, right, Cooper said it, we're trying to bet on the 1%, right? We have a top 247, so how do you sort which guys you want to put in there? We're going to give information to the guys, or attention to the guys with the most information. And that information comes from supplementary data points. How did they test? How big are they? What does the track and field metrics look like? That is all taken into consideration. It's much easier. You could have two guys with the same tape, right? One of them runs a 10.9 and is a 46-foot triple jump, and the other guy, he's got equally as good game tape, but you don't know how tall he is. You don't know how fast he runs the 40. You don't know anything about him. Which one are you going to bet on? Oh, and this kid's also young for his grade. So for us, those camps are collection points. I mean, we do not get everyone. We don't have the NFL scouting combine where the best is being brought to us. I think the guys at the UC Report and that Under Armour Next Camp series, they do an excellent job. We've said it in the past, the National Combine down there in San Antonio, that's another great thing. But we're trying to collect as much as we can, because at the end of the day, we're trying to count cards, all right? Which guy do we want to bet on? And that's those supplementary exposure points, the testing, data, that all helps us paint an easier picture and get to a conclusion by the end of the cycle.
All right, last one, Drew. Let's get out on this one. We talked a lot about the video game, so I'll ask you this. Andrew asked, Brad asked, he said, what college programs do you want to rebuild in dynasty mode on the new game? I was just looking through some teams. Not one comes to mind. I used to rock with Air Force back in the day, the Jesuit Blue Jays. Shout out to my old high school. They just had the same color scheme. I don't know. Is there one that kind of like pops out at you? Be like, yeah, that would be fun. I think the biggest difference is now you got the NIL part of it. So like there's names to this, right? Like there's a little bit of like, I kind of like this roster a little bit low key. Like is there a team out there where you're like, I think they got some stuff. Like for me, like Southern Miss, man, I watch them every year. Southern Miss, Troy. Like I look at those two schools, I'm like, I could probably do some things with them.
Oh, well, I got to plug this. On CBSSports.com, they got a bunch of the writers together, and they went, 1 through 130 and wrote why you should, play with that team or start a dynasty with that team. So it was a really fun kind of like exercise to see what they highlighted. For me, I'm going to go with Florida Atlantic, my alma mater. I've already said it. I'm going to try to play a season as fast as I can, and then I want to get into the transfer portal and try to assemble as many of those guys as I can. I don't know who jumps out in terms of like young, budding rosters. I think you said it, Kansas State with Avery Johnson. Like, that's fun. I think Florida with DJ Lagway, that's fun. I mean, these are guys that we've scouted, and now you get the opportunity to play with them. Nick Harbor there at South Carolina. The UCF one, like my wife wants to play with UCF because, like I said, they have those rocket launchers that'll shoot off if you're playing a night game there in Orlando. What else you got, Coop? Who else? You got to give me someone. You can't say Southern Miss.
Why?
That's your rebuild school?
I like Southern Miss, man. I have to go to Hattiesburg every other year for Alabama and Mississippi. Hattiesburg's just one of those towns. It's a good town. I like it, And honestly, I wish there was more resources put into that program. I like Will Hall a lot, Joe Marino, the DPP over there. They're good. I'd probably roll with Southern Miss. No other team's kind of sticking out to me right now.
I think the other thing too is you got to have like a lot of uniform combinations, right?
I guess. Hey, last thing. A lot of upcoming commitments, right? And we talked about a lot of these. Is there one in your mind, one potential combination of, we talked about Pickett, McNutt, Bryce Davis, Antoine, Cortez Smith, Derrick Meadows, Vernell Brown. Is there one potential like landing spot for one of these guys where you're like, yeah, that kind of jazzes me up. That gets me excited a little bit. If this were to happen, I would love that for that kid in that program.
Can I give you two? I mean, is that not fair? I said it. I think Billy Napier needs Vernell Brown. I think no one's going to say it right now, but let's say they get into the season, the losses start piling up. I think there's a lot of people that will point to that recruitment and the direction it went. To me, I think he needs him. And then I think he fits what they wanted to do. I think he can be that Trey Wilson for them. He's someone that can be an electric. Go back to when Florida had it cooking with Percy Harvin and all those guys. He's a dynamic playmaker. So to me, like Florida, Vernell Brown, we'll see if it happens. I think Florida State as well. I mean, if VB3 was going to end up there in that Mike Norvell attack, he certainly can create some chunk plays as well. And then the other one, Derrick Meadows and Notre Dame, right? Notre Dame is a team that's going to be in the college football playoff conversation with it expanding to 12 teams, right? So once they get in, how do they take down some of these other programs? They get athletes like Derrick Meadows that can do some things that they haven't been able to do in the past. So Notre Dame, Derrick Meadows, that's one I'm going to keep my eye on this weekend. I got a big golf weekend, like bachelor party weekend going on, but I'm going to be glued to the phone. And those are the two that I'm kind of keeping my eye on.
I'm excited for you, man. Well, I'm going to get off this podcast. I'm going to go try this game out. I'll report back next Tuesday. But guys, if you love college football recruiting, 24/7 Sports is the place to be. Like I said, make sure to stay locked here to 24/7 Sports, the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel, 24/7 Sports Live. Tomorrow we got commitments. just coming out of every place you could possibly imagine. It's a great week for college football recruiting. For Andrew Ivins, I'm Cooper Petagna. We appreciate you guys as always. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you next Tuesday. Let's go.